Greetings, comrade. Mother Russia sends her regards.
You expect me to beg, human?
I don't expect anything from you except to die and be a very cheap funeral.
Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed is some of the most fun I've had playing a video game in 2022. It's a charming, colourful remake of an old Xbox and PlayStation 2 game that tells the timeless story of a small grey alien falling in love with a human female who's so far out of his league that it's almost like an entirely different sport.
Yeah, I get it.
It's been developed by Black Forest Games, and like their work on the first remake, they've done an awesome job here at updating a cult classic for a new audience. And I think even if you're not a fan of the original games, well, there's still a good time to be had here.
Are you serious?
Right, so story-wise, it takes place 10 years after the events in the first game. Returning anti-hero Crypto and his commanding officer Pox seem to have settled into a pretty comfortable life on Earth, residing in San Francisco now in the late 1960s. The main enemy faction this time are the KGB, because of course they are, and those cheeky commies strike the first blow here.
So, what has been problem?
Destroying Pox's mothership, which sets Crypto off on a good old-fashioned quest for revenge.
Uh-oh. That can't be good.
Taking him from San Francisco to London, Japan, Russia, and then finally the moon for the finale. Aided along the way by a former KGB agent named Natalia, who in typical Bond girl fashion actually ends up becoming the love interest by the end of the game.
So you'd think.
And this is really at its core what the whole story's about. I mean, there might be all this stuff involving the KGB, MI6, and an ancient alien species, but at its heart, it's really the classic underdog story. You know, about a little man just punching above his weight.
Damn it, Crypto, focus.
Man, I haven't seen someone punching so high above their weight since Jay-Z got with Beyonce. Kinda reminds me of the whole Elvis and Joanna dynamic from Perfect Dark, only I can't really remember Elvis always trying to hit on Joanna half the time.
It makes no sense.
Let me just say, if these two ever got stranded in the ocean, there'd definitely be no threat of Crypto drowning with those life rafts nearby.
Ooh, I think I'm in love.
Now, there seems to be a bit of a trend lately with certain reboots and remakes, where they feel the need to go back and censor dialogue or remove other elements from the game, because they're worried about how the whole thing might come across in the modern age. Usually this kind of stuff is removed on behalf of people who don't even play the games in question. Destroy All Humans 2 is one of those titles that comes from that glorious age in gaming, you know, before these elements came under intense scrutiny, which is why it's got a campaign where you're playing as a 3-foot-tall alien who can get away with making countless sleazy remarks to a woman that's twice his size.
Hey, Cupcake, my face is leaving in 15 minutes. You wanna be...
Finish that line, and I blow your cooey off.
There's even a disclaimer at the start of the game here where they basically just outright say that they're keeping all of this stuff in. You know, I guess more or less just kind of telling those more easily offended types to just deal with it. And I know that a few things did get censored in that first remake. I mean, I think it was a few lines of dialogue here and there, but to the best of my knowledge, most of the original content is still here in this sequel. I mean, if it isn't, well, you'd kind of be hard-pressed to notice. And either way here, Crypto makes so many passes at Natalia that I think in the end she finally caves in just out of his persistence.
Wow, no kidding. That's gotta suck.
I mean, who could say no to a face like this?
I'm resisting you right now, Crypto.
On that note too, I think we do have to talk about just how ridiculously good this remake looks. Destroy All Humans 2 runs on the Unreal Engine 4, and this is a prime example of what happens when this thing is put into the hands of people who actually know what the hell they're doing with it.
Whoa. I've had wet dreams that weren't this good. Whoa. I've had wet dreams that weren't this good.
Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Visually, it's colourful, it's charming, and it's also expansive. I mean, the campaign is split across 5 different open worlds here, and these are pretty damn big in size. The view distance when you're up on an elevated position is really impressive, and there's such an incredible amount of detail here when you go off and start checking out the environment close up. San Francisco and Japan on the one hand are bright and sunny, whereas London is often overcast, dreary, and foggy. And then Russia is tainted by toxic gas, radioactive fumes, and blisteringly cold snow. When you finally get up there to the moon, gravity is even affected now, with jumping being a lot slower, so there's a real stark difference between each of these areas, even down to the appearance of all the NPCs. And honestly, there's so much character here with some of these guys just being absolutely hilarious.
Sake? Oh, I spit on it. Patooey.
In San Francisco, you've got hippie chicks walking around with no bras and blokes with giant afros. And being set during the height of the Vietnam War, there's also like a high concentration of soldiers as well, you know, stationed around the city. In Japan, you'll see droves of ambiguously aged schoolgirls, along with salarymen and even the Yakuza. All these guys wearing stylish white suits, or others walking around in their underwear, decked out head to toe in gang tattoos. Yeah, and what would any self-respecting Japanese level in a video game be without a Godzilla reference?
Kill it, Crypto! Kill it!
This, I think, was my favourite area in the whole game too. There's a whole bunch of missions here where you're teaming up with a faction of white ninjas who happen to be mortal enemies with the evil black ninjas. It even gets to the point where you can freely walk around their base as allies and they won't even bat an eyelid, which kind of makes a nice change here to the other 90% of their game where people scream as soon as they see you. It's kind of fun too, walking around their base and seeing these guys meditating or training, and that's also another part of what really impressed me was how it really seems that there's been no stone left unturned here when it's come to keeping the game world feeling lived in. I mean, go into a park and you'll see a bunch of people chilling out. In Japan, there's markets, restaurants, and back alleys all populated with people. As for the rooftops, which are usually empty and unpopulated in, you know, most other open world games, this time you'll often find people on them. But then go along the rooftops in Russia and they're all covered with TV antennas because, you know, no one really wants to spend time outside when it's 20 degrees below zero. I actually went back and played a bit of the old Xbox game to see how it looks. And you know what's kind of wild here is how the remake almost looks like what your brain remembers the original looked like. Which is kind of funny to say too, considering how old that game looks by today's standards.
Okay, you piqued my interest.
You want to know what's really sad though? I just finished playing through that Saints Row reboot, which was a total piece of shit by the way. And the world in that just felt absolutely empty and lifeless, like the whole thing was being held together by duct tape. And now here we have like a remake of a 16-year-old game made by a bunch of Germans in a broom closet, and they somehow managed to create a more believable and populated game world, and one that's brimming with soul.
Whoa! I don't know, man. You didn't tell me you were gonna get violent.
That first game had a distinct 1950s vibe to the whole thing, paying homage to the popularity of the sci-fi genre at the time, along with taking jabs at McCarthyism and the growing hysteria that had in the US. Now with the sequel, it kind of feels like a James Bond film. It's got references to the Avengers, no not those ones, these two.
Well done, Mr. President, well done indeed.
And I even heard a few Monty Python lines here and there too.
You're all unique.
Hey, we all unique.
You're all individuals.
Hey, we all individuals.
I kind of feel like these backdrops are also taken right out of James Bond films. I mean, at one point we're going from You Only Live Twice to From Russia With Love to Moonraker for the finale. And yeah, how fitting with Natalia also being an ex-KGB agent.
Da, Crypto. Very impressive.
I mean, I've lost count of the amount of Ruskies that Bond's banged over the years. Plus, like most Bond girls, she's capable, intelligent, and attractive. I know. Nowadays, it seems like most female characters in video games can only be those first two.
Okay.
It also helps that Crypto's a likable little dude too, and the abundance of unlockable outfits adds a lot of charm too. I mean, you can dress him up as Austin Powers, Elvis, a samurai.
Come again.
Or even put an outfit on him that's like a reference to the first Predator movie, because sure, why not?
Exactly. You can't beat that kind of muscle.
You can see that little alien brain swimming around inside his skull, with the sides of his head being slightly translucent, and if he runs through mud, it even starts to dirty his spacesuit.
Not so fast, my ultra-violent minion.
Just makes him feel like a real character, and not just a bunch of tessellated polygons. Tessellated? Does that make sense? Combined again with some genuinely good voice acting. The guy who voices Crypto, J. Grant Albrecht, has been in so many video games that you probably heard him without even realizing.
Okay, you got my attention.
And Richard Horvitz returns to voice Pox. And even if he just always sounds like he's voicing Invader Zim, I'll never get sick of hearing him and Crypto go at each other.
Oh, brains! My lives are flashing before my eyes!
I don't know, man, it just kind of astounds me at how much effort has been put into this presentation. I mean, even in this intro cinematic, the table these guys are sitting at is believably reflecting what's being projected on the screen onto the table. It's crazy. But I guess I should kind of start talking about the gameplay, right? Well, when it comes to that, it is a pretty simple game on the surface, but it's also got a whole heap of mechanics and toys to play with to the point that it really starts to feel more like an open world sandbox. Playing as a creature that looks like the universal depiction of what most people think aliens look like, so that means walking around in broad daylight's gonna get you more than a few weird looks. So again, a big part of the gameplay is disguising yourself as a human, taking over someone's body this time and walking around in their skin undetected. If you ever seen trying to jack into someone though, nearby NPCs are going to then try to run off and call the cops. And your main option here to subdue them is with the power of free love. Yeah, that's an actual mechanic.
Come again. Never mind.
I actually kind of like it though, how there's like a pacifist approach to dealing with humans. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, I like snatching someone's brain out of their skull as much as the next man does, but definitely fits in more with the whole peace and love vibe of the 60s, you know, to simply subdue these people through good vibes. And the fact the NPCs dance and react differently in each country is also pretty funny too. And if the heat starts to get to be too much, well, you can simply possess someone and then just radio in a fake all clear message.
We got him.
10-4, all units stand down. 10-4, all units stand down.
And you're gonna need to be doing this a lot too, because a whole lot of the story missions involve having to go undercover and read people's minds to help you complete your objectives. And it's sure far easier sneaking in the back door than trying to blow your way in through the front. Anyway, when the space gloves do come off though, there's no shortage of ways to blow shit up here. And let me tell you man, Crypto really puts the destroy into destroy all humans. Now, you gotta keep in mind that you're playing what's essentially a 16-year-old game here, you know, just given a hell of a facelift. And with that considered, yes, it does kind of feel like a dated combat system, in the sense that all you're really doing is locking onto enemies and then just pressing the fire button. But I do think that the abundance of weapons in these other abilities adds a fair bit of depth to it. Your most basic weapon is the Zap-O-Matic, an electrical gun that automatically locks onto nearby enemies and even chains between multiple targets. And look, it doesn't do that great damage, but it does recharge quickly over time, plus it never runs out. What you really want to be using though is the Disintegrator, and yeah man, what sort of Martian would Crypto be if he didn't have some kind of energy weapon that could turn people into ash? The only downside to this gun is that you have to frequently de-atomize nearby objects to get ammo, and you can only do this one item at a time. That kind of makes getting ammo back a bit of a slow process, but when this thing is fully upgraded, I reckon it's the best weapon in the game. What I also used quite a lot here was PK. Now that's Crypto's psychokinetic ability to grab objects and throw them around. You know, stuff like explosive barrels or even just other humans. Sending them into the stratosphere or slamming them into the ground like a pog. Yeah, remember pogs? Returning is also the anal probe, which, yeah, does exactly what it sounds like. But I have to say that outside of the novelty and the few times you have to use this weapon, that I didn't really use it. I mean, look, I get that the game is called Destroy All Humans, but at the risk of sounding like a bit of a snowflake, you know, ironically in the same video where I mock them, I just kind of think that destroying someone by shooting a probe up their ass that causes their head to explode, just kind of a little bit too extreme, man. And look, I get it, it's a reference to the long-standing joke about aliens and their fondness for sticking things up people's asses, but I don't know, just somehow zapping someone to death seems a bit more merciful. As for the new weapons, well, I think there it's a bit hit and miss, no pun intended.
Well done.
The first one is the Dislocator, which causes enemies and objects to bounce around. And again, look, don't get me wrong, it's a neat spectacle. But I just think that shooting someone in the face with the Zap-O-Matic or the Disintegrator is a far more effective strategy. Then after that, you've got the Gastro Gun and the Meteor Strike, and both of these, thankfully, are pretty awesome. Gastro's a little trash-talking robot that hovers around and helps out by shooting at nearby enemies, and it's probably the only instance where you can say that having Gastro is a good thing. Yeah, this is coming from someone who almost shat off half their body weight after cashing it a few years back.
Lower life forms, when will they ever learn?
And then Meteor Strike again is like self-explanatory, feeling like a bit of a Call of Duty kill streak where you can bombard a small area with meteors to do hefty damage. By far the coolest looking weapon in the game, and I never get sick of dropping this thing on an unsuspecting group of commies. I think overall the combat is pretty decent, though it can feel kind of repetitive at times, and considering that enemies are either really fragile humans who go down in a matter of hits, or instead super tanky enemies who shrug off attacks like it's a slap on the balls. Just kind of feels like you're either melting someone instantly or having to seriously lean on that fire button to put them down. Either way though, there's nothing here that's really going to fry your brain. You really just have to try to shoot everything as quickly as possible and then just hide when your shield runs out and, you know, wait for it to recharge. Being able to zip around and take to the air with your jetpack and dash side to side, I guess helps, but it's definitely a combat system that's more about reflexes than it is mobility. Saucer combat returns again too, though I can't help but feel that it's been a bit scaled back this time. This is where you hop into Crypto's flying saucer, which has its own set of weapons, from death rays through to tractor beams. The visual being able to level entire buildings still looks awesome, but it just feels like there's so few missions this time, which actually involve hopping into this thing and reducing cities to rubble. Most of my time in the Saucer was spent with this new gene blender mechanic, abducting certain NPC groups by the dozen to harvest their brains. Still more humane though than shooting a lethal probe up their ass. But it's still important to talk about because behind all of this is a really robust upgrade system. Each mission has main and optional side objectives, and completing these side objectives is going to get you a small bonus which gets you more resources to spend on upgrading stuff. I mean, these side objectives are like a simple addition, but it really does help the gameplay immensely, because some of these are really kind of creative. And I mean, there might be minor differences to getting the missions done, but they end up being major in the grand scheme of things. You know, considering otherwise you could just get through the entire game using a single weapon. And damn son, there's a lot of upgrades here too. From upgrading your weapon proficiency through to just upgrading your jetpack so a double jump can quickly launch you up into the sky. I mean, as for that one, that's not only fun, but it makes navigation a lot easier. Plus it also goes hand in hand with another upgrade that creates a shockwave when you land. I mean, these upgrades that are more than just extra damage or extra ammo, you know, they change the way you play the game, which ends up keeping the gameplay interesting and engaging the further you get. Plus, they definitely packed in a fair bit of stuff to get through here. I mean, just going around finishing all of the Gene Blender challenges is going to take a fair bit of time, as there's multiple challenges across each location. Kind of feel like they picked the right number of people to abduct too, so it's long enough that it's not too easy to complete, but then not too long that you start to get bored out of your skull. Overall, it's really kind of hard to fault the amount of content that's been packed into this thing. I'd say the main story alone is going to take anywhere from maybe 8 to 10 hours to get through. And then plus when you include all of the side content, you know, the side missions, the challenges and collectibles, well, that could easily be like another 4 or 5 hours on top. But look, I don't want to pretend that this thing is perfect, and yeah, I did have a few grievances, starting with the bugs.
And on behalf of oversexed aliens everywhere, let me just say thank you.
Now, to be fair, I didn't experience too many of these, but they are definitely there.
I'm getting a strange feeling about this place.
Mostly had bugs involving clipping issues with vehicles, you know what I mean? Just cars doing things they're not supposed to be doing. Occasionally I wouldn't be able to interact with my spaceship or talk to an NPC, which was kind of annoying, but these could always be fixed by just restarting from the last checkpoint. So all up, I don't think the bugs are too bad, and they're definitely not on the same scale as that recent Saints Row release was. As for other things, well, I guess the campaign kind of dials up its bullshit meter for the last few missions, just throwing a heap of the tougher enemies at you as a means to increase the challenge. And those final few boss fights are honestly just absolute horseshit, and about as fun as using your asshole to try to take off a bottle cap. I mean, I know it's kind of expected that that's the end of a game, so it's going to be harder than the beginning. I mean, that's game design 101. But there's a real shift in the difficulty towards the end of their campaign that starts to feel almost out of place, and it just becomes super crushing. Instances where you're just taking so much damage and it starts to become impossible to figure out what's actually happening. You feel like you're in the middle of a mosh pit and everyone around you is wearing knuckle dusters. The fight against that Godzilla monster in Japan, I think, is a perfect example of this. I mean, there's so much going on here that it's like information overload, and it becomes really hard to ascertain where you're screwing up and why you're taking so much damage. There's also a few quality of life omissions that I found disappointing, like the in-game map here lacking the option to place down your own custom marker just seems like a really weird omission. As a result, you have to go back to the map screen all the time to get your bearings when you're trying to head to like a particular spot. Collectibles only showing up when you're in their proximity is really going to force most people to also use a walkthrough, and I just wish they had a better system here of locating this stuff than this method. Having the 2-player co-op option I think is also kind of awesome, but the only way to do this is split screen, either local or remote play, and it's just kind of weird here too that they didn't include the option for online play. I know this kind of harks back to the Xbox and the PS2 version, an era where split screen was still the norm, but you'd kind of hope they'd see the potential to update this and add in the option for basic, even peer-to-peer connections.
Well, beggars can't be choosers.
But you know what, at the end of the day, none of this stuff really bothered me all that much, and I almost feel like I kind of have to highlight some of the negatives, just so people don't hop into the comments section to try to ream me out.
Thanks, I wrote it myself.
I'd still have no issues recommending Destroy All Humans to pretty much anyone. I went in with absolutely zero expectations, and to be honest, a little bit jaded and burned out, especially after having played Saints Row. And not only did the whole experience pep up my spirits, but it ended up, like I said, being some of the most fun I've had in a video game this entire year.
No, focus, damn it!
It runs good, it looks good, it's well written, and it's funny, and it's got a decent length to it.
Okay, not what I was expecting.
And if Black Forest Games want to continue giving the rest of the games in this series the same treatment, well, then I'm all for it.
Right on, time to book it.